As a Gen X Korean American, I'm going to add my 2 cents to Kimchi Cake's post about what is 4B.
4Bs in the 4B movement are no sex with men, no dating men, no marriage with men, and no childbirth to men. But how did South Korean women in South Korea get to this point? To give some context and background, we really have to look at South Korea's society and culture along with its history to really understand what the 4B movement is and how they got here. So the 4B movement emerged on South Korean feminist circles on Twitter back in 2017 to 2018 and didn't really gain any traction until 2019. And one of the catalyst events that sparked the feminist movements in South Korea happened on May 17th, 2016. A man stabbed a woman to death in a toilet at a karaoke bar near Gangnam Station in Seoul. Now, the victim and the murderer did not know each other. They had never met before, and the murderer later confessed that he did it because he hated women and
So the digital nomads that started this feminist movement in Korea were young. They were in their 20s and they were young women. They were probably younger than 20, some of them, but none of them were really old. And she mentions Gangnam where this incident happened. And the interesting thing about Gangnam is that Gangnam is a very posh area. And that's where all the parents, all the moms with kids and babies are trying to have housing over there because that's where the good schools are. So, Gangnam is a place where all the women with kids are and trying to be so that they could position their kids to go to college, because going to college in Korea is not easy. And there is no sign of 4B movement in Gangnam whatsoever, because Gangnam is like the place to be if you're trying to get your kids to get ahead, and they
corset movement. Now, the Escape the Corset movement, which started in 2016, served as some sort of inspiration to the 4B movement as we know it today. The movement called for Korean women to liberate themselves from societal norms and toxic beauty standards. Now, Escape the Corset movement resisted cosmetic surgeries, makeup, skincare, clothing, and shaving their heads in protest against men. Their analysis and approach deeply influenced the 4B movement. Now, another catalyst is when President Yoon became president of South Korea back in 2022. Now, during Yoon's campaign, he basically blamed women for the growing economic insecurity and shrinking job market in South Korea. He also said he planned to abolish the Ministry of Gender Equality and family, civic, labor, and social groups such as Korean Women's Associations United, which Yoon blamed the ministry's officials for treating men like potential ex-criminals and escalating gender inequality. Now, South Korea is deeply rooted in patriarchy, and the system benefits men. It's been like that for centuries. Now, over the past 50 years, South Korea's economy has exponentially grown, propelling South Korean women into getting higher education and into the workforce. But the roles of being a mother and a wife have not evolved at the same pace. South Korea has one of the worst gender pay gaps in the
So Kimchi Cakes does a very good job of explaining this the women's inequality up to this part, and she forgot to mention the book that propelled this whole thing with the workplace, which is the book. It's called Kim Ji-young, born 1982. And that book basically describes a woman who starts as a young girl and goes into going to college and then getting a job at the workplace and being discriminated against. And she's feeling like, what have I done with my life? You know? And so I have a more in-depth review on my page. You could go back and look at it. In the book, she describes as a Korean woman, once you are married and you are pregnant, that the companies basically start phasing you out because they know that once you have a baby that you're not coming back, and if you do come back, it's gonna be on a temporary basis. So they start already favoring the men and phasing out the women. So the women really, after having a career and even an education, after you have a baby, you're of no service to any corporations or companies. And she talks about patriarchy as far as how President Yoon started blaming women for not coddling the men, basically because in the Korean social system, That's how the patriarchy works, is that men, since they're born as babies, are coddled. They're made excuses for, and they're put on a pedestal, and they're treated better than a girl. So as a woman, if you're not coddling the men and excusing their behavior, then it's like, what is wrong with you? That's the patriarchy that is different from America, because America does not do that. If anything, in America, I think they excuse the white women more than they excuse the white men.
South Korea does not have any laws that protect the victims of dating violence because they don't fall under the umbrella of the Domestic Violence Punishment Act. And a lot of Korean women who are married do not report DV situations, unfortunately. In Korean culture, marital and dating violence or issues is seen as a private issue between the families, and they don't like getting police involved. In a study, 50% of Koreans reported that they did not wish to call the police for an incidence of marital violence because it...
So domestic violence, I think, is pretty rampant in Korea. I mean, I don't know everybody in Korea, so I can't. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I for sure it is. But so how they handle violence or domestic violence or even dating violence, stuff like this in Korea, is not by law so much, like she said. It's by money. Like if you've done somebody some wrong in Korea, what they do is they pay money. It's like, what do you call it, restitution. Of course, that's if it's not your wife.
Sensationalized in the West. The 4B movement is a relatively small movement in South Korea still, and it's not as popular as Americans think. But that's because women fear for their lives if they come out and say that they're for the 4B movement or that they're feminists. But there are a lot of nuances and factors.
4B movement in Korea is not a thing. It's really not a thing. And Kimchi Cake seems to think that it's because a lot of the women are afraid for their lives, but I disagree with that. Korea is still a very traditional country, and they still traditionally want, like, Korean parents want their kids to get married and have babies. This is not a thing. The reason why Koreans are not having babies is because of finances. It's because they can't afford it. It's because of the economy. It's not because of the 4B movement. Lastly, the 4B movement in Korea is anti-trans. It's very homophobic. As Gumio, my mutual, I will tag her and you could go watch her video because I can't download it. But yeah, as Gumio has pointed out, it's not what you guys think it is.